All right, today we are diving deep into one of the most significant and, frankly, one of the most dramatic rituals in the entire Hebrew Bible. We're talking about the Day of Atonement from Leviticus chapter 16. It is a fascinating look at how an ancient people dealt with a really universal problem.
I mean, just think about it for a second. How do you actually deal with a whole year's worth of failures, of missteps, of rebellion? And not just for one person, but for an entire nation. That growing mountain of spiritual gunk. It has to go somewhere, right?
Well, ancient Israel had this pretty radical solution. They set up an annual spring clean for the soul, a day that was so important, so central to their life with God that it was often just called the day.
So yeah, this wasn't just any old holiday. This was the spiritual high point of the entire year. It was like a complete reset button, designed to deal with 12 months of accumulated baggage.
Its purpose was crystal clear: to create a permanent way to sweep away the nation's sins. And this was about purifying everything, not just the people themselves, but just as importantly, the very space where a holy God chose to live right there among them.
And that right there gets to the core tension of this entire ritual. How can a perfectly holy God live in the middle of a messy, imperfect group of people? Well, the answer is very, very carefully. The danger was immense, and it was absolutely real. You know, the instructions for this day begin with this incredibly serious warning. It actually references the recent deaths of Aaron's own sons, Nadab and Abihu, who died because they approached God the wrong way. The message could not have been clearer. Not even the high priest could just waltz into God's presence. To do so would be fatal. So, the high priest preparation was, well, it was meticulous. First, he had to atone for his own sin. Then, he had to bathe completely. And finally, he had to put on a very specific set of clothes, all before he could even begin to act on behalf of the people.
And get this, he didn't wear his usual splendid golden robes of office. No, he wore simple white linen, basically the clothes of a slave. It was such a powerful symbol, stripping him of all his status, because before God, in that holy space, he was nothing more than a simple servant.
And then, finally, before entering what was essentially God's awesome throne room, he had to create a smokescreen. He'd take burning coals and handfuls of incense to create this thick cloud, a necessary wall of protection. Because to look upon God's glory directly was to die, and this smoke, it literally ensured his survival.
Okay, so with the priest prepared, we come to the absolute heart of the ceremony, this dramatic ritual involving two identical goats, whose fates are decided completely by chance, by casting lots. Now these two goats, they represent two different sides of a single act of atonement. One is for the Lord, and it's destined for sacrifice. The other is for Azazel. It's this mysterious name, maybe a place, maybe a desert spirit, we're not totally sure. This is the goat we now call the scapegoat. And together, they show how sin is dealt with through both purification and removal.
The first goat is killed and its blood is brought into the most holy place. Now, this is so important. It's not just about forgiving people, it's about cleansing the physical space. The idea was that sin creates a kind of spiritual pollution, and God simply will not live in a polluted sanctuary. So this blood acted like a spiritual detergent, wiping the slate clean for another year.
Then comes the public, really dramatic part. The high priest lays both of his hands on the head of the live goat. And as he does this, he confesses all the wickedness, all the rebellion, all the sins of the entire nation, symbolically transferring that whole mountain of guilt onto this one animal. Then the goat is led far, far away, out into the desert to a remote place, and it's just set free.
And this illustrates the goal so brilliantly. It was this visual, tangible demonstration that the people's sins were gone, not just covered up, but carried away, banished, to a place where they could never ever trouble the community again, irrevocably removed.
But for all its power, for all its profound symbolism, the New Testament writers saw this entire ritual as a shadow. It was a powerful pointer, for sure, but it wasn't the final reality. It was a placeholder for something even greater to come.
And you know, the crucial point, the thing that really proves it, is the fact that it had to be repeated every single year. That very repetition was this constant sledgehammer reminder that sin was a persistent problem, and that the solution, as amazing as it was ultimately temporary.
So Christian theology sees every single element of this day pointing directly to Jesus. He's seen as the perfect high priest and the perfect sacrifice, offered once for all time. He actually fulfills the role of both goats, dying to purify but also bearing sin away. And maybe most radically, his work completely changes the rules of access to God.
And this all culminates at the moment of Jesus' death. The Gospels record that the massive curtain in the temple, that very barrier the high priest could only pass through once a year, was torn in two from top to bottom. The ultimate symbol of separation was just destroyed.
That single, powerful visual act signaled the end of the entire old system. The way into God's presence was thrown wide open, which, of course, leaves us with a pretty profound question to wrestle with. What does it truly mean to have unhindered access to a holy God?